Hello, good afternoon. Good to see you again. I'm happy to be here. My name is Tanja Vorwerk. I'm the Deputy Director General at the BMZ, which is located some houses wider along the Rhine. Probably most of you know our wonderful office, which has been the former Chancellor's office with Chancellor Kohl. So probably you know that. So I'm happy to chair this session this afternoon, and I hope you all had some time to care about yourself, to get some food, some rest, and some coffee to start this interesting discussion in this session on distributed renewable energy, real market or an aid-driven sector. We all know that an estimated 1.3 billion people worldwide lack access to electricity to fulfill their daily needs. Energy poverty has a major consequence for those affected and poses a significant challenge to sustainable development. Their quality of life and often their health is impaired. Their educational income generating opportunities are constrained. Therefore, distributed energy solutions play a crucial role in elevating poverty and providing a sustainable source of livelihood. Increasing awareness of the profitability of the decentralized energy markets and potential business opportunities have led to the arrival of a variety of new business models. And I'd like to let you know that last week I had a wonderful meeting in the south of Germany, in Bavaria, where our minister comes from. It was a very, very small village with 2,500 inhabitants, and they are the so-called energy village in Germany. They've got several prizes because they create 5 times the energy they need and they use. They have e-mobility in the whole village, and we see there are some early movers and there are some companies already who are submitting batteries and other things you need for the distributed markets. This is the focus of the session, and this session will provide you with an overview over the decentralized energy market. It will identify the challenges of a decentralized energy market. It will outline what is needed to speed up the implementation of rural energy and services, identify what is that decision makers need to bring up about change, and finally to define how the REN21 community can support and track the progress of uptake and their feasibility in other markets. But before we go into the discussion, we would like to hear our keynote speaker, and I'm pleased to name Mr. Ogunlade from Sierra Leone. Please come here, and we are looking forward to what you are telling to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Let me start by thanking the organizers of this meeting for giving me the opportunity to share some of my views with you. I have tried as best as possible to come up with some ideas that would tease the public. I'm not trying to provide answers to some of the questions that you've raised, but possibly to point people to tease them a bit. I was in the session yesterday and I observed that not too many people know what's going on in the continent of Africa. So I'll try to end up with a few slides by telling people what's going on there. It is not unusual. I remember a meeting I was in the US, and somebody was describing Africa like it's just like a petrol station down the road. Unfortunately, it is not. It is the second largest continent in the world. It has about 52, 53 states, it depends who you talk to. Because these guys break up when they like and form their countries. So, especially when you have these enthusiastic military fellows. It's a very, very interesting continent in which it's so different that most of us happen to know what's going on when we leave the continent. And we find ourselves in a meeting like this, we know a lot more what's going on within the continent than when you're down there. So I've decided to include a few slides which would help to keep the record for REN21 and also for some of my colleagues. So I'll be willing to take questions on it during discussion, because most of my work has been on Africa as a continent. Unfortunately, apart from that, I come from a university. I've spent different arts. One, I've been with the IPCC for over 15 years until I got to the position of vice president of the IPCC and involved in the production of over 12 or more reports. Then also, I've had my 3 years as a politician, which teaches me that academia and politics are just two different things. And so I was very smart to move out of it and get back to the university. And somehow, I seem to be comfortable with my colleagues. They didn't refuse me. They accepted me, so I'm now at the university. I hope I'll stay there now. Now, I'm supposed to talk on the distributed renewable energy, real market, or yield-driven. I think to start off, what we should be happy about renewable energy is that renewable energy has gone through the phase of maturity. I remember in 1982, when it was 10 years after the Nairobi conference, and I remember I met an old priest from Europe. He was in the Bulawayo conference, and he had a small business in Bona. So I asked him, what's going on? He said, oh, I'm making stoves for rural people of Africa. So I said, but we've moved a lot more than this. As an engineering lecturer, I find it very interesting. But now, what we've seen is a growth from these small-scale operations to utility-size operations. And utility-size operations is where the market-drivenness comes about renewable energy. We are no more talking about these small gadgets, but now we are talking about utility-size operations. And this gives room for distributed renewable energy. And Africa is not different from the other continents in the world. This was said by the chairman. According to the World Energy Outlook of 2011, 1.3 billion people out of the just 7 billion people in the world are not connected to electricity. And 2.3 billion people do not have access to clean cooking fuels. 84% of all these people live in rural areas. And if you want to correct this anomaly, we've got to understand that energy is the pivot of modern society, and energy drives prosperity. So the governments of the world, including my group of governments, cannot sit by and allow, because most of these people who we are talking about are under the age of 20. They have significant amount of energy. It's very, very easy for them to cause chaos. So politically, it is totally unacceptable to contain these people. You have to provide modern energy. And providing modern energy providing modern energy requires significant investment. And at the moment, you cannot connect them to the grid for several reasons. One is financial, but not only financial. Some are very technical reasons that you cannot connect them to the grid. And distributed renewable energy seems to be the most attractive. And to do that involves certain factors, key factors. These are by no means exhaustive, but just as I mentioned, they are teasers. Cooperation of all stakeholders, that is public, private, etc., the different people. Enabling support policies, appropriate business and financing models, and adequate and appropriate technologies. Now, the market for distributed renewable energy is growing at a very fast rate, both in developed and developing countries. One might ask oneself, what are the reasons for such growth? One, the drop in the price of solar and wind technologies. Policy incentives, which has helped to stimulate the market, and significant returns in order to get commercial interest. And these are three main reasons, but they are definitely not exhaustive, which is pushing the distributed renewable energy. Now let us dilate a few moments or two on because this is a buzzword that you will find in many literature, enabling an environment. And I think we should open it out a bit so that we all know what we are talking about. Political commitment by concerns, governments, or region with ring-fenced resources. It is interesting because in the earlier papers, if I remember in the 60s and 70s, we always talk about political commitment. But now, we are now in this phase in which we think, in some cases, we have too much political commitment. I don't think you need to spend time to excite our governments these days. The governments are many governments of the world have ministers of renewable energy. Even in Africa, some countries have ministers of renewable energy. But one aspect that we are having, which I think India is one of the leading countries with it, is in which when you look at the national budget, they ring-fence money for rural areas. And many countries do not have it. So you have difficulty when you have resources because the civil servants are very smart enough to divert resources to other things. So rural areas are not very attractive, it's not sexy enough. And the same thing with the renewable energy. People like to talk about it, but very many countries don't spend money on renewable energy. So that is very important about enabling our environment. Clear, dedicated rural electrification strategy. That is also not always present. But you need a very, very clear, dedicated rural electrification strategy for the enabling environment. Then a platform for attracting the involvement of local entrepreneurship and attracting investment. In some countries, like the part of the world I come from, we don't even have local entrepreneurship, let alone talking about rural areas. So if we need to talk about distributed renewable energy, we should have local entrepreneurship. Then power sector that can accommodate independent power producers. Yesterday, some people discussed about feed-in tariffs. Now, feed-in tariffs is good, but not all countries have it, and not all countries have the appropriate one. We still need to work on it. And The reason why I'm saying that it is a topic for research at the university, that people have to spend some time and look at how we get. The other thing is regulators. Regulators, even for urban areas, and we still are struggling, what's the role of a regulator? Because in some countries, I don't think even some of the regulators know what their rules are. Some of them see themselves as an organized military officer. Some of them see themselves as just messing around, but they do not effectively regulate. So before we move to rural areas, let us, in the urban areas, have a clear idea of what regulators are and what they are supposed to do. Adequate pricing that reflects local conditions as well as commercial feasibility. It is very important. I think in another area, I think it's in agriculture that they have this, what they call this in them now? Banks that attract financing. But the agriculturists are struggling to come up with the right model. The well-known banks, they only know collaterals. And it doesn't work in the rural area because their method of understanding of money is different. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Their method is different. So we still need to work on it, that we need to come up with adequate pricing and their assets and see how you can use that. Financing policies that may include loans, taxes, etc. These are just teasers to show you what I think enabling environment involves and how we can use it to. Another area that we should spend some time about is the business model. A lot of us use it, but there are times we will ask ourselves, what really do we mean by it? Provision of technical and financing services in rural areas. Now, I remember when I was working in South Africa, when they had the solar home systems, you find out that at some stage when we did an evaluation, you will spend far more money to get the maintenance services to the rural areas than even the cost of the solar home system. And that's really destroyed the systems. And that is involved with the provision of technical services. Maximize the use of local resources to reduce overheads and operating costs. And I think this one, it is very important because we have to depart from what we've been used to in urban areas. In urban areas, you have a local, an external company coming with all its experts, and local people are used only to collect data. We've got to move out of that nonsense. It doesn't work. You've got to get involvement of the local people. And in the long term, you'll benefit because you can reduce overheads and operating costs. Provision of energy for domestic as well as for productive uses. Now, this is a very, very important point. And I think that is what has killed access to energy. And people, I don't particularly like to use it, but I'm forced to use it because it's well used, energy poverty. These are words which do not help energy discussion. Because when you say energy poverty, you start to ask yourself some fundamental question. Poverty and energy do not normally go together. Energy costs money. If people are so poor, then they cannot have energy. It's as simple as that. Energy costs money, especially if it's modern energy. It costs money. And when you look at energy, people always talk about provision for domestic use. we should always talk about productive use, because you got to make money in order for you to pay the bills. So you should always think about the productive use of energy. Long-term, affordable financing strategy. It leads to the next point on financing models that consider both the upstream, that is the project developer, and the downstream, the end user. These are two groups of people, and their needs are completely different. This is also another area that needs a lot of attention: technology development and applications. I'll try as best as possible not to spend too much time on this graph because of my training as an engineer. We tend to think that that's the only thing people should know, which is not true. Now, the very first point, what kills areas of appropriate technology and areas of energy access? It was people think of energy as an emergency measure. So people were only worried about things that works. It definitely it's not technology. For it to be a technology, you have to think about sustainability. So this emergency nature killed quite a lot of equipment, I would call it, that were developed. And now, when we talk about distributed renewable energy, we have to bring in sustainability into consideration. And if you bring sustainability into consideration, then reliability and cost competitiveness should drive the choice of technology. And we should try to avoid premature failures. The reason is, in rural areas, people have visitors all the time, starting from students who want their degrees, go to planners, and then go to external people, developers, who come to ask them questions with questionnaires and things like that. So they are fed up. And if you go to take technology to those areas, please, you got to make sure that they work. If they fail, these guys don't want to see you anymore. They can be very brutal. And especially, with all due respect, the women. If the women don't have patience, in some areas, once it's a machine, they only call the men. But when you call the men, you make sure that it works. So premature failures is not good. Two areas that have come for questioning. One is the intermittencies in these natural systems. And how do you connect solar and wind technologies to the main grid? And my friends who are power electronics guys have been working on it, and we've got to start applying some of their results. I'm not in that area, but I know that they are working on it, and I read some of their papers. There are also global system monitoring. We got to use it for net monitoring, and these are things that we take for granted in developed countries. In fact, in this country, the moment you tell the taxi driver where you're going, he plays around with a small thing in his hand, and then he knows where he's going to take you. We've got to start using these systems in rural areas. And the way you can do it is you have to come up with stringent quality control and standards to be incorporated. We cannot be running on systems and not coming with these basic engineering things. So in short, what I have done, as you would notice, is to come up with teasers, and I think when we come to discussion, some of these points would be raised. As I mentioned before, I just want to include a few view graphs on what is happening in my continent. I'll talk about energy in Africa, economic trends of Africa, changing energy trends in Africa in the fossil fuels, the renewable energy technologies, the policy environment, and I'll conclude. Now, Africa is by far the least developed continent in the world, both in terms of fossil and renewable energy, which can be described as inefficient production and use of fossil fuels, weak and inefficient infrastructure and institutions, and only off-grid and small-scale RET system. The overall trends are changing. One, there is an emerging economic growth taking place in the continent. In fact, my country, before the Ebola thing, was operating at 18.3% GDP growth. And increased number of stable political systems, some movement from small-scale RETs to utility scale, and the future is very encouraging. Now, sustainable energy in Africa include gas systems in decision-making. It's not only renewable energy, it includes gas systems, and I can take questions on that. This is a view graph to show you the African situation, to show that it's quite. Foreign direct investment grew by 27% in 2011 to a quarter of the world's investment, total 80 billion in 2013 and expected to be 150 billion by 2015. Countries that have attracted investments include Zambia, Ghana, Botswana, Tanzania, Cape Verde, and Mauritius. Inter-African investment is also growing. Countries include South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria. Now, in short, Africa is very rich in both fossil and renewable energy sources, but less than 20% has been exploited. The use of modern energy is concentrated in North Africa and South Africa. Energy infrastructure is extremely weak and unconnected. Regional integration is non-existent, but improving with the growth of regional power pools. Regional initiatives for coordination is growing. Now, these are examples. In the case, most recent finds in oil are offshore and in the continent, and these are countries that are. Production in Nigeria and Angola put together can chase that of the production of Saudi Arabia. And this is one renewable energy that has been receiving attention quite a bit, and that's the hydropower. And you can see that only 8% of the 24% of exploitable hydropower are being exploited at the moment. And this is a table to show you the various hydropower projects that are going on right now, and the dates that they expect. So by 2015, we expect significant of these projects to come up. This is a wind farm in Ethiopia, and North Africa, 10 gigawatts by 2020, 1456 megawatts in South Africa. That's a solar project in South Africa. That's also in South Africa. And this is in Morocco. And this is in Morocco. And that's in Mauritania, the Mazda project. And Nouakchott, this is in Mauritania. And that's rooftop systems in South Africa. And these are just to show you the utility scale projects that are. Then there is a significant amount of geothermal. Now, several national policies on sustainable energy. I should just spend 1 minute on that. I noticed in the REN21, there are some countries listed without renewable energy. It is because they do not have a policy called renewable energy, but if you go into their energy policy, they have sections on renewable energy. Half of the countries have national targets. Natural gas development is growing, more rural electrification projects, and regional interest. So I can better conclude that there is increased regional attention, effective interface between policymakers and intellectual community. It is impossible now to say we do not have political commitment. We do. It's at the level of the African Union governments. Development of gas infrastructures and LNG projects, improve regional integration, large-scale duplication of successful projects is needed, increase manufacture within the continent to grow. And I think with that, I shut up.
Thank you so much. So will you stay here for the discussion round with us? I'd like to introduce the discussions we will have today's session. First of all, Kanika, would you like to join me? Kanika is a junior research associate at the CEE in India, and she was working at the REN21 in Paris. And Kanika has worked extensively on distributed renewables energy in developing countries, urban energy policy, and financing renewable energies. Secondly, I would like to ask Lal to come with us. Lal is the co-founder of Blue Energy in Nicaragua in 2004. It's an NGO connecting communities to energy, clean water, sanitation, and other essential services. He's currently consultant at the IDB team for the Sustainable Energy for All initiative in America. Is that right? Okay. We will have the SE for All donors meeting next week here in Bonn. So, Wim, would you like to join us? Wim is the Senior Strategic Office in the renewable energy sector at the SNV Netherlands Development Organization, where he worked in the area of small and medium biogas, clean cooking solutions, small solar electricity, off-grid rural electrification, and biomass for produce by small and medium-scale enterprises. He has an experience of over 30 years in the field on market-based deployment of different renewable energy technologies. So, and last but not least, Bosil, would you like to join us? Bosil is an energy advisor at the GIZ in Germany. He's responsible for the advisory to a portfolio of the GIZ projects on rural electrification in Africa and Asia. And formerly, he was working in a GIZ project in this field in East Africa. And Sena would like to join us. Sena, in 2001, you established the GVE International, the largest youth movement in Africa, and he has been in the forefront of promoting of sustainable renewable energies in Africa ever since. He has implemented the Clean Energy in Africa project in over 20 countries that aims to create smoke-free villages using technologies which are energy efficient and replace fossil fuels. So I would like to come here in the round. And first of all, I'd like to get an overview. What is the situation of distributed renewable energies from your perspective? You come from very different fields and like to hear what is your perspective on this issue we are discussing this afternoon. Bosil, would you like to start? This is the microphone.
Good afternoon, everyone. The sector is pretty large, so I wouldn't take so long in describing it in detail. GIZ has, with the support, of course, from BMZ and a number of other governments, the chance to work in a number of countries and in very specific fields across the energy access and decentralized renewable energy spectrum. But maybe 3-4 areas that I could just outline that are important, maybe for the discussion to probably dig into more detail. The sector itself could be looked at according to the technologies. We are looking at a wide range of products that are being deployed by companies using the purely market-based approach. We have a number of civil society organizations out there doing great work, also deploying products and small portable technologies like solar lanterns, cook stoves, solar home systems. The sector also is characterized by larger systems like mini-grids. Mini-grids are systems that are able to electrify larger settlements, even small towns. So that could be something to describe the sector, so products and larger grid-based systems. If I dig into challenges, it would probably take a few hours. So every specific technology has its own challenges, and for every single element of the enabling environment, there are solutions that are out there. Different countries have experimented and tried out different solutions and tools in terms of policies, financing instruments, insurances in some places, and also promotion instruments, be it financial or non-financial, also through technical assistance. So maybe just briefly to start.
Yes. Let me add one part of the question. So you have been working in East Africa. Are there any experiences from this area which are interesting for the audience? Could you join this with us?
Ongolare Davidson is very familiar with West Africa. I can share a few experiences from East Africa. One important thing in Africa is in East Africa in particular, is to look at is the coverage of the mobile phone and mobile phone penetration. And in East Africa, there are quite a lot of dynamic developments recently around mobile money, pay-as-you-go, remote monitoring of systems, product registration. All of that goes through the use of the mobile network. So those are innovations that East Africa is bringing to the world, and they're being replicated by a number of other players in other geographies. So this is probably something very important. We have also in East Africa quite a lot of innovation in the area of regulation when it comes to mini-grids. Both Tanzania is doing quite a lot of work. Kenya is looking at some specific aspects around mini-grid regulation. So those are also lessons learned that can be transferred to other countries.
Yes, thank you. Sena, I learned that you are the winner of the Lighting Africa Development Marketplace competition, very long word, and the Energy Globe Award. What was it about? Can you tell us?
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and I would like to extend my appreciation to REN21 for giving us this opportunity. Yes, it's a World Bank initiative. I think one of the best so far. It's about powering the continent, but also highlighting successful projects. So it's a competition that's done quite annually, and the best 50 projects are being showcased in a big marketplace. The latest one was in Nairobi, firstly in Accra. I was 2007 in Accra. And then 25 of the 50 get some $100,000 US as grant. So we put forward some projects about distributing solar lamps to rural communities. You know, in our place, people buy charcoal without asking for subsidies. Even though the market fluctuates up and down, they never go to government, can you help reduce the price of the charcoal? They just go and buy it without asking for any reduction. It's the same, that's what we're trying to do with the solar lamps. We managed to distribute some solar lamp to women, solar lamp that can help to charge cell phones. Very recently, we gave out to women groups solar charging stations costing about $1,000. You know what, Anna? Women group pay back the $1,000 in 6 months just by charging cell phones. It's real, it's happening. And knowing the economic value of just charging phones, having access to news on the radio, how good it can be for communities, it shows that there's a lot out there. There's opportunities out there. So the question of our session, is it aid-driven or market-driven? It's not. The point is now, if you take the big bank, the African Development Bank has not one single project for mini-grid or off-grid project, not at all. So who are those doing the job? NGOs, communities, local groups, etc. So it shows that there's a huge business out there. And I just met a lady a few weeks before coming here, and we asked the lady, what's your best dream ever in life? And she said, the best thing I would expect in life is to marry a husband that has light in the house. So it shows that it's not only about economy, but also a lot about dignity. That's where we need to looking at the 90% out there who are still waiting for us.
So what are your recommendations for politicians, for the big international institutions?
Well, it's good that we got this clear message from Ban Ki-moon, say, please stop financing fossil fuel, go renewable. I would say also, yes, divest to renewable energy, but please priority to the billions poor out there. The small is still beautiful, because big banks are not fulfilling the promise. The second recommendation I would like to convey is that we need also to look at innovating funding options. There's a lot of money in our countries. We can do this ourselves. We just need to be sincere to look at our national circumstances. One other way is that government, NGOs, and donors should learn how to work all together. I'm happy that I'm here in Germany. Something that a bit frustrates us on the field is that there are some who have some money, like GIZ, and those small NGOs like ours, trying to make things happen. But we lack coordination on the ground. We are trying to train communities on charcoal improved carbonizing techniques for years. And sorry to say, I'm very positive about it. GIZ came to Togo. Instead of calling us, asking what you are doing, GIZ started doing the same thing. I'm talking from the ground. So we need to have some coordination work that be done also on the ground. And lately, please, it is possible. If we want to reach out to numbers, to billions of people, we don't need to invest in the big. DR Congo has the biggest hydropower in Africa, but still, DR Congo is the darkest country in Africa, with less than 6% having access to electricity. So if you build Inga 2, Inga 3, Inga 4, don't expect billions or thousands of Congolese to have access to electricity. Rather, it will help some business, which is not bad. But if we want really to reach out to 100 renewable by 2050, I think we should focus on those who just need basics. It's calculated that a family that needs just one TV, one phone, and one lamp, just with 0.75 kilowatt per week. So simple to help a family to get out of energy poverty. Those are some of our recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Sena. So we just learned that the experience he made in his project, he thinks it can be scaled up, but there is a lack of coordination. You have been working with the SEO for All initiative. So what about this initiative? What role could that play in the future?
Okay, that's a pretty broad question. Thank you, Tanya. And thank you for making this event possible and the invitation to REN21 to get such a fabulous group of experts to discuss. It's a great experience. As you mentioned, I have 10 years of experience in the field, so I'm far away from Professor Davidson and others here. I started from the nonprofit sector for many years, and then helped form a renewable energy association for my country in Nicaragua, and finally moved on to the for-profit sector. So I can give you sort of a perspective of that, and that's what I'm trying to bring to the Sustainable Energy for All working group in the Americas. We have a problem that's a lot more simple to solve in a way than Africa. We discussed yesterday 600 million people without access to electricity in Africa. In the Americas, we're at about 32, 33 million, looking at the whole continent. It's possible that we will have 100% access to modern energy services in 5 years. We're not talking 15 or 20. it's a challenge, but it's possible. Scaling up, however, is a trap. So I think small is beautiful. I think the issues, the real difficulty of the problem is within the details. And when we look at global electrification projects and subsidized distributed renewable energy in general, I think we often forget that we're working with the poorest of the poor, and the most people they're the most difficult to get to, and it's very difficult to scale. You don't scale in absence of infrastructure, you don't scale in absence of roads, cell phone coverage, government services. This just doesn't happen. You can have a model, you can have an Excel sheet that will say you'll multiply systems and it will cost that much, but it's just not true. So I think we share very similar challenges. It's just the market and the context that is different. I think first, this aspect that mostly distributed renewable energy systems are for access for rural populations. It's most of the reality. I love to work for my for-profit for the 1% of rich coffee producers or cacao producers that want a distributed renewable energy system because they just want cheaper power. I'll take the contract with pleasure, right? But this is less than 1% of the population that needs this, probably even 0.1%. So the lack of public infrastructure, I think, is the biggest problem. And although you say we can solve it ourselves, usually these countries will not solve the public infrastructure problem themselves. So we need more cooperation there. As you said, Professor Davidson, technology is 10% of the solution. We all know 90% is social. And so there's no scaling because you need to tailor solution for each population. That means you need to listen. Often we send teams. We've done that with the NGO many times. You do a survey, you speak with people. But in the end, you have a preconceived idea of what system you want to bring in. Sometimes the system even doesn't work. That also happens. But you need to listen and listen in order to implement. And so that's the hardest part, is to really match your reality with the community's reality, the villagers' reality, and find a system that maybe you didn't think about, or go smaller. So that's one of those shared lessons I want to talk about if we come back to recommendations in a second point. I think my partners here want to talk. So I'll just conclude this sort of introduction with saying, so I think another aspect with the GIZ, we discussed that, most of the strategies for scaling up, for serving more people are based on indicators, and I think this comes back to the REN21 work, and I want to share a little bit on that later. Indicators love the lowest hanging fruit solution. So indicators say you want to achieve 50% electrification in areas, so you go for the easiest populations, and it hides the difficulty that the other maybe 20 or 30% are actually a lot harder. And I have a lot of examples I'd like to share, maybe in a second time too, stories of why that's actually a lot harder. And finally, in some areas, we also fight with distributed renewable systems and this subsidy issue. We fight a culture problem, which is that we come after 20 years of aid programs and donation programs. People are used, at least in Nicaragua, people are used to not pay anything because these have been given by many aid organizations that year after year now have learned to work differently. But the culture remains. And so a distributed small-scale renewable energy system, whether it is the solar lantern or the cook stove, which is sort of the tier 0, tier 1 of the service, growing to a solar home system, growing to, let's say, a community system, and maybe even a mini-grid, people assume that's going to come for free, right? So paying for that is possible. Absolutely agree with Sena. People have the buying power, not to get the solar home system maybe, but at least a solar lantern, at least an improved cook stove. But they will probably not buy it because they will wait until some program will come around and give it. And unfortunately, it still happens. Now it's not aid agencies anymore, but it's maybe confessional organizations or some NGOs that are new in the market and want to make a name for themselves and still apply old models. And we see that all the time. So we need to change that culture. I think it's the last of my list, but one that is quite important. So that's it for a brief introduction. Maybe we can come back in a second time on recommendations, and if I have time, some stories, but maybe that's for the questions later.
So as far as we learned from you, it's only 10% about technology and 90% about social behavior and learning. So also the donors have to change into a mode of business model, as far as I understood you. So Kanika, you have been worked more in the field of research, what could be the incentives to make this move on, to make this change moving on quicker?
Thank you, Tanya. So in my work on distributed renewable energy, the thing that's really a roadblock in moving forward is the complete lack of data and consolidated data sets. And because of that, any recommendations that we make are half-baked. We don't have the full picture. And a lot of that is because data is not being collected, or data is so disaggregated, or countries aren't sharing it or collecting it because of the various different players that are on the field. And not everybody wants to share. Like Senna said, that the practitioners on the ground are often working at cross purposes with the international agencies, or they're not really recognizing the synergies that exist. And because of that, the real picture, the full picture, is not being able to be captured. But I think what is also really important on the data side to think about it is the indicators on which we're collecting data. And I think in the renewable space especially, we're so used to following the same indicators to collect data, but a lot of these indicators are not applicable to the distributed renewable energy markets. And a lot of indicators that are really important about, say, the cost of fuel collection, or the time required for fuel collection, who makes the choices of the energy mix that a household uses, and things like that. There are no indicators that exist to capture this sort of data. And because of the absence of these things, it's really hard to make recommendations or to formulate new policies which allow a rapid uptake of distributed renewable energy systems and to end this problem of energy access, or at least come closer to the end goal of ending the problem of energy access. But I think the idea which is now gaining a lot of impetus across the globe, especially now, I think in India, from my experience there recently, is just this, that putting your weight behind renewables. Because I think energy access has always been a goal. For every country that doesn't have 100% energy access, it's always been a goal for the governments in these countries to try and get there. And in all of this time, the bringing of the grid has proved to be economically prohibitive, and it has just not happened. And I think now more and more countries are realizing the power that distributed systems have, and sort of they also seeing the experiences of all the developed countries are trying to leapfrog onto renewables and renewable energy future. And so combining the two, I think a lot of countries are putting their weight behind distributed renewable energy systems. And from the Indian example, there's a lot of policy reform and fiscal policy reform where distributed renewable energy systems are being given a lot, they're being given priority sector lending status by the central bank, which means that, long-term loan lines at low interest rates and things like that, which hopefully, if adopted efficiently and in more countries, would help further the goal of reaching energy access by 2030.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Wim, you have experience with several renewable energies. So what is your perspective? Are there incentives? Are there steps forward in the rural area, or what is your experience?
I'm afraid my experience is very mixed, because I think if you look at the central question of this session, for some countries the answer is it's not a real market and it's not aid-driven. I just take the ECOWAS status report, which was published Monday. If you go to figure 19 and you see 6 countries in the region and you look at investments, out of 36 cells for a 6 years period, 26 times it's 0. Okay, we talk about projects more than 1 megawatt, so I know there is quite some things going on below 1 megawatt. But simply taking that, let's say, observation is that we really have to look country by country to see what's going on in this market. And some countries are doing very well. That's also our observation as SNV. We work in 39 countries, so we can easily compare, let's say, what's going on. Some countries are doing really good, and I think there is a lot of private sector, and they're doing very good things. In other countries, it's basically zero. You don't see any private sector coming in simply because of the fact it's not profitable. So I think we have to be careful in our discussions and really to see what we are discussing. Rather than have a general discussion, I would like to go for a more specific discussion. One central theme is, of course, let's say, how private sector can be involved in, let's say, achieving access to energy. And our stand is that we cannot do it without the private sector. That is as simple as it can. We see the donor budgets are becoming smaller. The task at hand is huge. So we need private sector, but at the same time, the private sector cannot do it alone. So we really have to work together with the private sector. Not only the international private sector, but also the local private sector is so important. Let's say the last mile distribution in this market is extremely, let's say, difficult and challenging, and often not doable for international companies. So there is a big role to be played by the local private sector, and as SFE we really like to support them as well, but enabling environment and at the demand side as well, there are challenges we also need to address. Let's say we need also to be a bit more critical on let's say, what we as promoters of renewable energy are doing in terms of quality. I think it has been said that sometimes, let's say, the quality of the services towards the customers, the households or the SMEs in these countries is simply not good enough, you know. And if you have once a failure in a village with, for instance, a household biogas plant, you can forget about this whole village. So it's at the other side, if this unit or this equipment is working very well, it's a very good promotive tool. So I think here on quality assurance, we need to be more serious as a sector, and together with the governments and the private sector come to strict quality control systems, not only on paper, but also to enforce these. Another challenge is before coming to recommendations, but another challenge is, I think already said, coordination. Markets are distorted because there is lack of coordination. We see sometimes that friendly NGO or even governments bring in free of cost equipment, which is then totally frustrating your market-based approaches into a country. There should be a moratorium on free of cost kind of delivery. I think we should try to somehow have that accomplished, since we learned that once this was done in the past, there was no ownership among the users. So after some time, this equipment is not used and is frustrating the market again. So I think with this coordination should take place at national level, first of all. I think that there should be nationally embedded coordination. On top of that, we need to have coordination at the international level, and I think support organizations like SNV, but also donors, I think should also step up and do away with all their favorite projects, but really see how together we can work, let's say in a harmonized or at least aligned manner.
Thank you, Wim. I was looking at the people sitting at the right side, and everybody was nodding when he said there should be an agreement that phasing out energy for all for free. So would you like to support that position?
Yeah, 100%. For free does not work. I think what he said about the quality and the norms is pretty important. We started distributing solar lamp, you know, the African lantern that contains PV panels on top and batteries replacing where we put the kerosene normally. And after a year, the product was totally a blatant failure. So when we went in with our new Sunking Pro lanterns or light that can charge 2 cell phones, nobody wanted to buy this, even though it passed through the very rigorous Latin Africa requirement. So it shows that the first product we sent to the market was bad, and it discouraged all our clients there. So I think there's an issue here if we also want to reach the 100 renewable target. I think our family should develop some clear criteria, some norms, follow what the Latin Africa is doing, saying this and this, and for instance, say what do we call access to energy? I know Practical Action has done some work around the total energy access. When should we say that someone has really access to energy? What's the good type of solar lamp that we're supposed to give? What type of trees should be planted and how? So I think there's some kind of norms that our family should give out. For sure, for free, it will not work. We are buying cell phones without asking for subsidies. We are buying charcoal every day in poor rural communities without any subsidies. The same can happen with renewable energy as well.
Wozil, what about a large tanker like the GI said? What about no more energy by free? Davidson, what's your position?
I think I made mention about the pricing. Usually, human beings don't value things that are free. It need not to be rural areas, it need not to be urban areas. Usually, people don't value things that are free. They value things that they pay for. And if you come up with innovative ways, it's for you to come up with ways in which you get people paying for it, even without realizing that they're paying for it. And there are measures all over the world that have been used to get people to pay for it without people realizing that they are paying for it. But free does not help. In fact, in many cases, free to people means filthy and dirty. Once it's free, they don't value it. People don't value it. And he made a very important point that there is a significant amount of financial capacity in rural areas in which people pay back in 6 months. And it's left for you to see how you can tap that. The only experience we get in my country was that, you know, the Chinese lamps. The Chinese lamps are very, very popular, and it has taken over kerosene lamps. So you go to all these rural areas, people buy these small Chinese lamps, and they buy batteries for them. And it's not free. Batteries are not distributed. People go and buy the battery. So I don't think coming up with a model that is free would help the situation. So.
Although you are nodding as well.
I'll add some more spice to it. We've also seen a lot of technologies, white elephants out there that are not being used. The experience shows that free distribution of products is not a good idea. But I would probably want to go in a bit more detail in this, hopefully some discussion. We probably have to sit down and define what should be free or what should be subsidized, because we're talking of a whole range of solutions that are providing energy, and certainly certain things cannot be paid for by end customers. We're talking about large infrastructure, so grids, and some countries do take the initiative to fully subsidize certain parts of the energy supply. So I would be uncomfortable making a recommendation to everyone out there, because the world is quite big and different contexts do bring different perspectives to the energy sector. I would be uncomfortable making a recommendation to every policymaker to ask their population to pay for everything. In some countries, governments do take the initiative to provide a lot of the public services for free. and if they have the resources at their disposal, it's up to them to decide how to do it. We advise on what would be sustainable ways of spending these resources, and it's really a very specific, context-specific solution as to how money is dispersed and who gets to benefit from them. So for us, the picture is a bit more complex, and we look at it based on the situation in the country.
So what about the role model? What could be the specific role of private companies in working together with public agencies, probably? So is there any recommendation you have about the role of the private companies?
There is quite a lot of private sector involvement. We mentioned some examples. We've seen also different contexts where private sector is left to operate without any control, without any regulation. Some countries even, the usual barriers for products are VAT and import duties when some of the technologies are not locally available. Those are major issues that private sector needs to deal with at the least. In some of the contexts, we have situations where governments pursue a public-private partnership approach where there are clear roles for both the private and the public sector with some incentives. The role of the private sector, we've seen different types of involvement. We've seen probably if we look at larger systems, maybe just because those are more complex. For when it comes to the products, private sector takes on quite an active role in many countries in doing both import, wholesale, distribution, last mile delivery to the door. So this is all, in many countries, private sector takes care of all these elements of the distribution chain. When it comes to larger systems like mini-grids, we have contexts, some of the West African countries where the government provides some sort of a license and some subsidy. The private sector is there to invest in all the assets. We have contexts where we have government put in place the distribution infrastructure. The private sector is in charge of providing generation assets and then distributing to the customers. We have even more complex situations in some countries now that are being discussed where you have 3-4 different entities being involved in different parts of an electricity scheme where you have public sector providing the distribution assets, you have a private company generating the electricity, and you have a separate entity which could be public, community-based and is in charge of selling the electricity or managing the revenue for the electricity that is being sold to customers. So all kinds of different variations out there.
So the whole range. Wim, you wanted to discuss it in more specific. So coming to the on-grid renewable technologies, what is your perspective for the next 5 years for the development in this field?
You talk about off-grid, sorry?
Yes.
Yeah. I think there will be, let's say, an increased, let's say, on-grid effort going on. But a lot of other things have to be done to really make, let's say, headway. I think we all know that in business as usual, let's say by 2030, the same number of people won't have access to electricity, and the same number of people won't have access to clean cooking. So a lot has to be done, and there is a lot of things in the pipeline. That is also a good thing. A lot of things are happening. We may have an energy goal in the Sustainable Development Goals. That is an advantage, I think. But at various levels, in the countries, at the coordination level, internationally, I think the task for us is quite big. So we have to speed up. We have to take all the resources. And in that respect, let me also, let's say, make a plea to REN21. I think a wonderful job has been done for the last 10 years, but we also know that a lot of new developments came in the last 10 years. So the scenario has changed. We have IRENA, we have sustainable energy for all coming up. The functions of, let's say, data collection and documentation, which was done wonderfully by REN21 and has played a very important role, we need to question ourselves, is that still relevant for the future? Or should we look to another function for REN21? Or should we try to see whether we can work together with sustainable energy for all? So this is a basic question, I think, for this house, maybe not to be answered today, but I think
what
it's...
would be your recommendations?
I think we need to move on. I think we cannot stay with the present functions. There are too many developments. I see myself, the sustainable energy, as a very powerful initiative, politically backed up. There's still many open questions on the legal, let's say, identity of the organization. But preferably, I see there is a lot of convening power. And I also see that they may play a big role on the international level when it comes to overall coordination. And that is required. And it goes further, of course, than REN21. You know, with small island states, I know already 4 to 5 projects which are being implemented by different organizations with their own government structure, with their own implementation modalities. I think these people in these islands are getting crazy of all these projects. It's just, with decreasing resources, I think we cannot go on like this. I know the ESMA program, I know your government is supporting initiatives, the Austrians have an initiative, it's too much. So okay. I think at that level also we need to become more effective and agree that we have to work together. So your plea is coordination, bringing together institutions, merge them? Maybe merging even. That's open for discussion, but at least we should sit together and find solutions to these questions. And that includes REN21. Okay, Kanika, data collection, it's over, we have done that now. There's no role for REN21 in the next decade. But REN21 is the organization which is currently trying to get data for developing countries across the world for distributed renewable energy. And as a person from a developing country, I always found it quite unfortunate that none of the other international agencies were doing that in a comprehensive way. The IEA does some assessment, but they also do they make a lot of assumptions and I mean, without taking any credit away from the work that they're doing, but I'm just saying that REN21 is making data on distributed renewable energy a talking point. And I think that it's really important and bringing together all the different stakeholders so that they can contribute this data and have a consolidated data picture so that everything else that Wim is saying about taking the next steps and reaching the 3 objectives of the Sustainable Energy for All initiative. None of that, in my opinion, would be possible if you don't know what your baseline is, where you're starting, or what's going on the ground. And it's the nature of the REN21 network that it combines all the different perspectives, like as on this panel as well. And I think that that's an important role that it needs to continue doing at least for a long time to come. Which is not to say they shouldn't do more, but I'm just... Okay, so from your perspective, there's still a challenge to get good data, to bring the issue of data in the conversation, in the worldwide conversation. And it's a cooperation of different agencies which bring us the full picture about the development of renewable energies. So you promised some recommendations for the politicians for us. I wonder if we can hear them now.
Well, they're not very broad, based on local context. I think the first one is that I would definitely agree with everyone here that more coordination is required. I think Senna brought up a very important aspect that when we discuss distributed renewable energy, we discuss access. So we need to define what is access and what kind of systems. There is great work by Practical Action. There is also SMAP that has taken that work and is now proposing a 5-tier methodology, looking at reliability, quality of service, and quality of the systems. That's very important. Obviously, duration, how much time can you have power, or cooking stoves. Health and safety, obviously, for cooking stoves is clear. you know, if it's a good system, it's still, it will help, it will promote removing fumes from your house. If it's a bad system, you have an efficient cook stove, it consumes less wood, but you still have toxic fumes in your house. And legality, you mentioned legality, that's also a key aspect. So defining what we're working for and what kind of data we're going to go and collect is key. So that's number one, and that's of course problematic if each institution has a different definition and a different set of indicators. So that's obviously a very important one. When we look at the opportunity, I also agree with Wim that the opportunity is there. It's clear. It should be easy for us to make this case because it's a trendy topic. We have the Sustainable Development Goals. We have the Sustainable Energy for All initiative that's launched. We have all the climate awareness that's building, and we're tying into this because we need to be on a scenario where we produce cleaner energy. And we have energy poverty issues that are also being brought up as social justice issues. So all these are drivers to make those recommendations and make them loud. But in our region, I said we had an easier job. I think it still is a difficult job, but we could not compare with Africa. We were able to integrate the work we did with IRENA and Sustainable Energy for All. So at the Nicaragua level, we decided that there were too many combining issues. We're not an island, but sometimes it feels like that. And so we decided that because there are 3 pillars of the Sustainable Energy for All, and because IRENA is the hub for renewable energy, we were going to use the support by IRENA, which was an expert workshop and a document and analysis, as the vehicle for the 3rd pillar, renewable energy. Mm-hmm. We're still missing help, and I'm calling upon the Danes, because they are the hub for energy efficiency. Mm-hmm. We're still missing help to complete, let's say, a comprehensive energy efficiency plan for 2030, which is a very complex issue. And we're working hard on the access part, which probably will come through a high impact opportunity for solar systems, tier 1, so everyone with a solar lantern. Start with that. And maybe we can get Pico Solar, where everyone can have a solar lantern and charge a cell phone. We can do that in 5 years if we get the right coordination and support. This will not solve the issue. Of course, access to energy is a lot more complicated, and if we want real development, we'll need a lot more of that. But that's one example of how we can coordinate. I think having precise data is key, of course, once we know what we want to go and measure. So I would encourage REN21 to continue and develop their campaigns, their efforts to tie into data collecting bodies when they exist, whether it is governments, whether it is census organizations, whether it is organizations of practitioners. So, for example, in Nicaragua, we have an association called Renewables, which coordinates 95% of all the actors, and we have forced them to declare how many systems they sell and where they are. So we have a mapping, it's online, and you can go and look at solar systems, small hydro, cook stoves, small scale wind, and so on, where they're installed. Of course, it's a huge challenge. But REN21 can continue and tie with these partners at the local level when they have data, and when they don't, probably work with statistics, right? Just work on that level. And finally, I would say private sector is key. It's going to solve the last mile. We need to learn from successful experiments. A lot of what we do in Central America comes from good practices from India or from East Africa, because we have much smaller markets, much smaller volumes. The products are made there, the models are made there. We just try to apply what has worked, but we need to keep learning. So these events allow us to exchange experiences, good practices, learn good reports also, such as produced by REN21 and other organizations, help us to learn. And I think that's key, that local solutions are the only solutions, but we don't need to reinvent what has been done and what has worked. So more events to help private sector organizations learn from each other are very important. Usually small-scale private sector actors don't have the funds or the resource to just go out and do that. It's not going to happen. Only large private sector companies, global, can do that, or government institutions can facilitate this happening. So we need more events that are driven, that are focus-oriented. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this discussion round is really interesting because in some fields they totally agree, and in others there are very diverse positions. So I would like to open to the audience for some questions. Oh, Okay, so good luck for the one who has the microphone.
Well, I have just a quick, yeah, you're biased, I'm sorry, and I will keep it really quick. I will just have a quick recommendation, reaction to Wim. I mean, the way you portray it is that we all act in silos. I can assure you that this is not the case. ARENA, as well as IEA, are on the board, on the steering committee of REN21. We are very closely collaborating with them, be it on data collection in different areas, be it on outreach. We are actually working together to closing the gaps. And I think it's not a matter of whether we need the one or the other. I think we need them all, but we need to work strategically, and there I'm with you, to coordinate our agendas, to not duplicate, but really to make a difference, to change. We have huge work ahead of us. Talking about energy access for all by 2030 is not something that's going to happen just like this, and I think it's important that many people articulate many different messages and actually work together, but I can assure you that this is the case and that we are not acting somewhere in a silo. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Ansgar, I'm with Greenpeace, and having lived in Africa advocating for renewable energy policies for the past 7 years, there's one striking contradiction which I've noticed in almost every country, and that is that the beauty and the very nature of renewables is that it's decentralized. The wind, the water, geothermal, the sun is a scattered, decentralized resource, can be harvested right at the point of consumption. In stark contradiction to that is the very little policy attention to utilize those decentralized resources. And from my experience, I think that is partly because of the reason that the business as usual is what policymakers are used to do. That is centralized procurement, centralized production, centralized distribution of electricity power. And when we honestly talk to policymakers across the African continent and we ask them, you need to restructure your energy infrastructure and your energy market, they object. They say, no, we stick to what we've done, because there are a lot of other agencies and NGOs who then provide the services in the rural areas. And we stick to centralized production, procurement. And because one elephant in the room which has not been touched upon is that these centralized processes open the door for kickbacks. That is the way the business works, that many politicians have vested interests in coal mining, in oil drilling, and all of that process is blocking really a fast track in accelerating decentralized renewable energies.
So
and
what
I think
is your question?
That's a comment and observation
Okay.
from the African continent. I think it's important to see that the governments still pursue business as usual while opening a wide door for international donor agencies to provide the services to their citizens, which they are not willing to provide. Because it's easy to have centralized production and to provide an urban area or industrialized area with that energy, and leave the scattered populations to deal with by international agencies. So that is the model that I see, and that is something that we need to somehow tackle.
Thank you very much. In my opinion, I believe decentralized or distributed renewable energy technologies have lagged behind because we, the so-called experts, have not been able to demonstrate the sustainability of the products we try to introduce to the rural people. Why am I saying this? The weakest link, for instance, for a solar system is the batteries and the lamps. Even when the beneficiary has the ability to buy these batteries, where will he get it to buy? You introduce the products, after 5 years, when the batteries are due for replacement, getting that battery becomes a nightmare. Just a bulb, to get a DC LED bulb or a DC fluorescent bulb to buy when you have the money is a challenge. Why? Because we've not been able to put in place the right framework, the right mechanism to make sure that these products are available to ensure their sustainability. we always compare to mobile phones. But mobile phone vendors make sure that once they introduce the phone, they make sure that at least the scratch card is available and is easily reached. And in the rural areas, they even brand phones to them, such that you can easily get a battery, or if your phone cracks, you should be able to get a cover to replace it. So I think there is a lot more for us as experts to do. Show me now a single distributed renewable system that has stayed for more than 10 years. Most of the time, they fail before their 10th year. And as long as we are not able to demonstrate and show to the entire world that these systems are indeed sustainable, we'll continue to lag behind. Thank you.
Okay. Lal would like to repeat it. Yeah. And you. Okay.
Yeah, let's enter both of us.
Yeah.
Yes, Wisdom, thank you. You're very right. However, the comparison is unfair. Solar cell phones will not live 10 years. And people go buy their time because they need it, so they go pay their bill. They themselves go pay their bill. So what we need to do for energy systems is that people will go pay their bill, make it easier for them with pay-as-you-go solar, with mobile payment solar, for example. So we're trying to do that. But I think it all comes back to infrastructure and government. So you're right, it's about the legal framework and the fact that there is a road for the product to be distributed, for the battery to be collected when it's over and to be sold when it needs to be changed, right? In the absence of that, it's just too expensive to go get a battery. We had the system in the first time. People would like to replace it. If it's a cell phone, it's worth $20, right? The cheapest cell phone. They'll throw it away. They'll get another one when they can. Well, the solar system, Pico Solar, we can do $20, $25. People get new systems, so it will work. It's just a matter of adapting the product to the market. I think about the legal framework you're mentioning, I'd like to bring up 3 examples. I said I would give examples. I think we need to speak precisely. So is it subsidy-driven or aid-driven sector, or is it a real market? I want to share 3 small examples, and then maybe we can follow up the questions, and also I'll give it back. One is we need to give the market a chance. So for example, small hydro systems in Nicaragua can interconnect to the grid, which is sustainability. But it brings them absolutely nothing to interconnect, because when they interconnect, they buy the energy from the main distributors at a higher price than they're able to sell. So if they interconnect, their consumers are going to expect to have 100% time electricity, but the local actor has no vested interest to do that at all, because by doing that, they're keep decapitalizing themselves. And that's just a fix in the regulation system that won't happen for several complicated reasons, but the legal framework is preventing that. That's giving the market a chance. No subsidy, just making it a fair playing level. Solar systems, that's more of a subsidize it so we can have a market. Solar system in the city will cost Pico Solar $20, $25. I can go get it, no problem. If I'm 2 days away, walking to a city that has a 6-hour bus ride from the main city, it's not worth $25 anymore. Getting there costs more. So a way to make the market happen and to subsidize so we have a market is, say, an aid agency or a government agency can fund it so that it's sold at the same price in the furthest outpost than in the city. At this way, you're not distorting the market. All you're doing, of course, it will create loopholes. People will play around it. Some people won't. But at least you will be able to help the market exist. And finally, I think cook stoves is the other issue where we don't have a market if people don't know about it. So the government needs to invest in educating so we have a market. First, create the culture for cooking cleaner, for saving your family from the fumes, through the school system or through campaigns. And then, of course, it's cheap enough, people will be able to get it. Maybe we subsidize it a little bit, and so on. So each case is specific, each country is specific. I'm not saying what works in Nicaragua will work anywhere else, and I know it's not true, actually. But some of these ideas need to happen, and we need to be precise, I agree with that.
Okay,
Sorry.
Stena, would you like to? Okay, so we take the next question, looking at the clock.
Yeah, hello, I already present myself. So I just would like to do some comment concerning the real market and the aid-driven sector for renewable energy. It's already have been proven that the aid is killing the market and the economics of a country. But it's also true that when you want to install a market, the market will work if it is structured. And concerning renewable energy, we need at first to well structure the market. And I will take for an examples. In my country and in many African countries, if you go to the bank and ask a credit to buy a car, you will, or to build a house, you will receive the credit. But if you are asking a credit to install a solar system, you will never get the credit because there is no structure concerning this area. So I think it's good that the market should be structured and also put the guarantee concerning the risks for the investor, and then it will move people to invest on renewable energy.
Thank you. We take 2 more questions.
I don't have any specific question. I have 1 or 2 comments to make. One is a gentleman from here who talked about storage systems, that I'm dropping it. Second, we are talking about distributed renewable energy. And very often we go into solar panels, solar lanterns, solar home lighting systems and all that. Are we talking about providing renewable energy or just a few hours of lighting? Let us be very clear on that. Second is, one of the most important things, we are talking about a distributed grid based on renewables. And if we are talking about renewables excluding biomass and biogas, it has to be either solar or wind, and probably to some extent small hydro. If that is so, you need to have storage systems in place. And what are we talking about in terms of storage technology? Are we able to get clear batteries with long life that need not be replaced in a long time? Thirdly is, no system works if it's based on charity. I mean, you give a solar home lighting system to a poor man saying that it's coming free of cost, it's of no value to him. After 3 years, it goes out of order, he'll say it's a publicly funded. So they'll come and replace it to me later. I mean, these we have tried in India and we have failed. And the fourth point is, everybody talks about the telecom revolution, the cell phone market, how it's working in Africa, how it's working in Asia. Who are operating these telecom systems? Private sector players. And they are in there for money. I mean, they are not here for charity. If that is so, can we have systems in place which will enthuse private sector players to come in and operate these systems? One of the things our professor said in the presentation is, can we have an IPP that can be integrated into the grid at a later point of time? Can we have policies and regulations in place? Can we work on such initiatives? Ours is a policy advocacy body, REN21. Can we talk about how the existing renewable systems can be integrated into the grid as and when it happens? Because I have an example. If I want to electrify a village with solar systems, the first thing he comes back and says, please do not do it. Because once you do it, I'll never get the grid in place. Because I'll be excluded from the agenda of the government to give me grid power, and I'll have to be satisfied with 3-4 hours of lighting every day. Let's not do it. There are social aspirations. Today, the poor are not lying back and waiting the government to do everything. They have aspirations. Let us also cater to the energy needs of the poor by having a robust system that can be integrated into the main grid. It's a different matter that I'm opposed to coal thermal power and all that. Can we have some grid integration strategy also in place? That's all I want to say.
Okay, Kanika, we take the very last question now because the time is over, and Kanika has the last statement.
Lucky me, thank you very much. I would like to comment exactly following up on what has just been said, and the question probably to you. I think we are facing, with decentralized renewable energy, we are facing a perception of a kind of second-class electricity in the population. And this is very dangerous, because renewable energy should not be seen as a second-class generation of electricity, and an electricity only for the poor until the grid will reach us. It's a comment and probably also a question to you, how you see this.
But it's an interesting comment, and I would assume in Europe it's the other way around. So renewables energy is the high-class energy. Kanika.
Just following up to the question Mr. Subramaniam had, and to Karen's comment, it's exactly what she said. Renewables and distributed renewable energy systems need to stop being, the stigma attached to them needs to be removed. And it's not that you will get 4 hours of electricity only. Surely there are, the grid at the moment, especially in the Indian context, gives you less than 4 hours. You can be an electrified village and get 1 hour or no power at all, but yet because the grid is physically in your village and there is a wire that comes to your house, you are considered electrified. And then there are households in Bangladesh that have a home system that is modular, that has all of the features that the sir in the audience said, that where you can remove just one bit, you can add capacity if your family size is growing. It's completely modular, it's easily available, it's affordable, and all of those things, but it will never be considered an electrified household because it's not connected to the grid. And I think the problem really is the stigma that we attach to distributed renewable energy systems and how they will only come to you when the grid cannot come to you. But in fact, studies have shown that when you have a distributed renewable energy system which has a cooperative structure and which generates local employment and has local communities have a sense of propriety over it, that it also spurts more economic activity, micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises begin business, and it's just all in all much more boost productivity of the village or the area, much more than connectivity to the grid, which is faceless. It doesn't really have, you always feel like, yes, I was entitled to it and now I have it, as opposed to a system that is developed in your village, which everybody feels like is theirs, and they feel like they participated in getting access to energy that they didn't have before. And so I think that the stigma really, if removed, would put distributed renewable energy systems on a pedestal that's actually higher than grid-connected energy.
Okay, thank you all for participating in this discussion, and it was really lively, and have a good rest of the afternoon all together. Thank you.